The phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize, but my stomach dropped anyway. It was 2 years after she'd walked out, 2 years of rebuilding, 2 years of finding our footing. I knew, just knew, who it was. The text message popped up, stark and demanding, "We need to talk. I want to come back to the family." And in that moment, all the careful stability I'd built, all the quiet peace I'd found, felt like it was about to shatter. I thought about Chloe, about Leo and Maya, about the life we'd carefully, painstakingly created. There was no way I was letting Clara walk back in and destroy it all, just because she'd finally realized the grass wasn't greener. She'd set our lawn on fire, and now she wanted to come back. But to really understand that moment, that absolute certainty, you have to go back to when things were, well, what I thought was normal. Looking back now, I can see the hairline cracks even in our happiest memories. We weren't rich, not by any stretch. I worked as an operations manager at a logistics company in Denver, steady, reliable, nothing fancy. Clara worked part-time at a dental office. Our cozy duplex in a quiet Denver neighborhood wasn't huge, but it was ours. It was filled with Leo's soccer trophies and Maya's drawings, plastered all over the fridge like colorful wallpaper. Weekend mornings, I'd be in the kitchen making pancakes while the kids argued over cartoons. Clara would shuffle in, still half asleep, and steal bites off their plates. Those moments, they felt utterly complete. A kind of wholeness I didn't appreciate until they were gone. We had routines that weren't exciting, but they were ours. Homework at the kitchen table, me helping Leo with fractions, Clara braiding Maya's hair. Movie nights piled on the couch under blankets. Sunday cleaning with old music blasting, dancing with the vacuum. It wasn't a magazine life, but it was real. And I genuinely thought we were happy. But somewhere along the way, Clara started measuring our life against a ruler I didn't even know existed. The change was so slow, so subtle, I almost missed it. She'd come home from meeting her new friends, and suddenly our duplex felt smaller to her. Our car felt older. Our usual vacation to a simple lake house felt embarrassing compared to where her friends had gone. Her new circle, women from the gym and the dental office, all seemed to be dating or married to men in finance or business. The kind of guys who posted pictures from Tulum on a random Wednesday. Clara started spending more time on her phone, scrolling through their stories, double-tapping designer handbags and restaurant meals that cost more than our weekly grocery bill. I'd catch her staring at her screen with this look, like she just realized she'd been living in black and white while everyone else had color. She never said, "I love you less." Instead, it was, "Sarah's boyfriend took her to Sonoma for the weekend," or "Did you see Jessica's new car?" At first, I'd joke about our own kind of wealth, the real kind. But the jokes started landing flat. She wasn't laughing anymore. The breaking point arrived on a completely ordinary evening. I was at our small desk in the living room, meticulously going through our budget spreadsheet, the apartment fund, school expenses, car insurance. All the stuff that keeps a family running. Clara was on the couch, phone in hand, the little swoosh of Instagram stories audible. I saw the glow of filtered luxury reflecting on her face. Then, she just exploded. Not screaming, but this raw, frustrated outburst. "This is it? This is our life? Bills and budgets, and nothing exciting ever?" I looked up, confused. We'd just taken the kids to the amusement park 2 weeks ago. We had a great time. But apparently, that didn't count. She kept going, talking about her friends' real lives, jewelry surprises, lavish trips. She said their partners made things happen, instead of just maintaining. And a cold dread settled in my chest. She wasn't talking about our marriage anymore. She was talking about a transaction she felt she'd lost out on. I tried to stay calm. "What do you want, Clara? What would make you happy?" She looked at me, distant, and said, "I don't know. Maybe I just want more." But she couldn't define more, just that whatever we had, wasn't it? The next few weeks were brutal, a quiet, suffocating kind of brutal. We didn't fight loudly. We just existed in the same space, her pulling further and further away. Even the kids noticed. Leo asked why Mommy was always on her phone now. I had no good answer. Then, one night, after the kids were asleep, she sat me down. She said it clearly. She wanted a divorce. She needed to explore what else life could offer. She felt she'd settled too young, missed out. I could have begged. Could have promised to somehow make more money, be more exciting. But something in me just went still. You can't compete with a fantasy. You can't win against an Instagram feed. If she wanted to chase that life, no amount of pancake breakfasts or stable love was going to stop her. So I said, okay. If that's what she wanted, we'd do it the right way. No drama, no fighting. We'd split custody fairly, keep things civil for the kids. My calmness seemed to break something in her. She'd expected a fight, expected me to fall apart. Instead, I was already thinking practically how to protect Leo and Maya. She moved out within a month, found a small studio apartment closer to Lodo where her friends lived. Our 50-50 custody schedule quickly became more like 70-30 because her plans kept coming up, girls' trips, dinners, events that couldn't be rescheduled. The kids would come back confused, telling me her apartment was tiny, no room for their toys. How she let them watch TV instead of doing homework because she had to get ready to go out. I never spoke a negative word about her to them. That was a line I refused to cross. But I started keeping detailed records of every missed pickup, every schedule change, every time I had to leave work early because she'd forgotten she had them. Our divorce was finalized in 3 months. Quick and clean. She didn't want the duplex or the savings. She wanted freedom. I gave it to her, while keeping the only things that mattered, our kids, and the stability they desperately needed. I thought the pain would fade once it was official. But it got harder. I watched her transform into someone I didn't recognize. Posting stories from expensive restaurants with men whose faces were always just out of frame, wearing clothes I knew she couldn't afford. Talking about manifesting abundance and living her best life while our kids wondered why Mommy didn't come to Leo's soccer games anymore. The worst part wasn't losing her. I'd made peace with that. The worst part was watching her choose the performance of happiness over the real thing. Choosing validation from strangers online over the 2 little people who just wanted their mom to show up. I'd lie in bed an hour. Duplex, feeling too big and too empty, thinking about how she'd said love didn't pay for trips or jewelry. I wondered if she'd ever understand that love pays for everything that matters. The boring stuff. The 3 a.m. fevers. The patient homework help. The showing up, day after day, even when it wasn't glamorous or Instagram-worthy. But she was already gone. Already posting champagne flutes at sunset. Already convinced she'd escaped instead of abandoned. All I could do was pick up the pieces. The first time Maya asked when Mommy was coming home, I told her gently that Mommy had her own place now, and we'd see her on weekends. But 3 months later, when she asked the same question, her voice tiny and broken, I realized she wasn't asking about a visit. She was asking if our family would ever be whole again. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and cried as quietly as possible. I didn't want them to hear me fall apart. Those first 6 months after Clara left were the hardest stretch of my life. Not because I missed her, I was already past that. But because I had to be everything for Leo and Maya, while pretending I had it all figured out. Some days, I'd drop them at school, come home, and just sit in the silence, wondering how the hell I was supposed to do this alone for the next 10 years. I stopped checking Clara's social media after a month. It was like watching a stranger cosplay as my ex-wife. Rooftop lounges, luxury hotels, captions about deserving more and choosing yourself. The kids' custody time with her became increasingly unpredictable. She'd have them for a weekend, then return them Sunday night wired on sugar, exhausted. She'd taken them to some expensive brunch spot instead of letting them just be kids. Or she'd cancel last minute with vague excuses, leaving two confused children who couldn't understand why mommy's new life didn't have much room for them. Leo started acting out at school. His teacher called me in for a conference after he got into a fight. When I asked him about it that night, he just said the other kid had two parents who lived together. It broke something in me I didn't know could still break. Maya developed a habit of clutching her stuffed rabbit whenever we talked about mommy. This little unconscious tell of anxiety. I'd watch her, pretending everything was fine, and wonder what kind of therapy bills I'd be paying in 10 years. My life became an endless cycle of work and parenting. Up at 6 for breakfast and lunches, school drop-off, a full day of work fielding texts from teachers, then pick up, homework, dinner, bath, bedtime. Then I'd collapse on the couch at 9, only to do it all again. I stopped accepting invitations to go out. No energy, no babysitter. Stopped dating because explaining my situation felt exhausting. I stopped doing pretty much anything that wasn't directly related to keeping my kids fed and emotionally stable. My brother called me once, said I sounded like a robot, that I needed to take care of myself. But I didn't know how to explain that I had no bandwidth for myself. Every ounce of energy went into making sure Leo and Maya felt loved and secure, despite their mother essentially abandoning them for Instagram likes and expensive dinners. Around the 1-year mark, I started hearing things through mutual friends. That Clara's glamorous life wasn't quite what it seemed. Whispers about her dating a married guy, bouncing between apartments because she couldn't afford the rent in her trendy Lodo neighborhood. About her working multiple part-time gigs to fund the lifestyle she was posting about. Part of me felt vindicated. But mostly, I just felt sad for her. Sad that she'd blown up our family chasing a fantasy that was never real. And sad that our kids were paying the price. She'd still show up for her scheduled weekends sometimes, always looking polished, put together. She'd take the kids to do something expensive, like a trampoline park or a fancy movie theater. But she'd bring them back, and they'd tell me how mommy spent most of the time on her phone, or how she got frustrated when they acted like normal kids instead of accessories to her new life. Then, around month 15, something shifted. I was at Leo's soccer game on a cold Saturday morning, one of those early games where your breath makes clouds. I noticed this woman, Chloe, sitting a few rows down. I'd seen her before, but never really paid attention. She had a son on Leo's team. After the game, while the kids chased each other, she struck up a conversation about the chaos of youth sports. And something about her laugh, genuine, unpretentious, made me realize I hadn't had a normal adult conversation in months. We started talking more at games and practices. Nothing romantic, just friendly parent chat. She mentioned she was divorced, too. Her ex had moved to another state, saw their son maybe once a month. There was this unspoken understanding between us, a recognition of each other's exhaustion and determination. Chloe started appearing in our lives gradually. So slowly, I almost didn't notice. She'd offer carpools, stay to chat, or we'd end up at the same playground. The kids would play while we talked. She never pried, but she listened when I needed to vent. And more importantly, she was just easy to be around. No drama, no demands, just presence. One evening, about 6 months after we'd become friends, Maya came down with a nasty fever, the kind that spikes to 103 and makes you panic. I was juggling trying to get her temperature down while also making sure Leo ate dinner and did his homework. Chloe texted, asking how Maya was doing because Leo had mentioned it at practice. I admitted I was overwhelmed. 20 minutes later, she showed up with soup and children's medicine. Didn't make a big deal about it. Just helped me get through the evening and left once things were under control. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the kitchen and realized I hadn't felt that supported since before my marriage fell apart. Things developed naturally from there. Chloe would come over on weekends, help Leo with a science project, or play board games with Maya. She'd join us for pizza nights, and somehow, our duplex felt less empty. The kids started lighting up when she was around, in a way that made my chest tight, because they were so starved for positive adult attention that wasn't coming from their mother. I was terrified to let myself feel anything for her. What if I screwed it up? What if the kids got attached, and then she left too? What if I was just using her as a band-aid for my loneliness? But she was patient with my hesitation. Never pushed for more than I could give. And slowly, I started to trust that maybe this could be something real. We didn't rush. We didn't even kiss until we'd known each other for 8 months. When we finally had the conversation about being in a relationship, it felt less like falling and more like choosing. Choosing stability, kindness, and someone who showed up, not for the Instagram story, but for the regular, boring Tuesday nights. The kids adjusted to having Chloe around faster than I expected. She never tried to replace Clara or act like a mom. She was just herself. She'd sit on the floor doing puzzles with Maya or throw a football with Leo in the parking lot. They started mentioning her casually. Like she was just part of their world now. I felt guilty sometimes, wondering if I had the right to move on when Clara was out there, presumably living her best life. But then I'd watch Chloe help Maya sound out words for a school project, or listen to Leo's rambling stories about his day with genuine interest. And I'd realize this wasn't about replacing anything. It was about building something new from the pieces we all had left. Life felt manageable again. Not perfect, but stable. We had routines that worked, and a little chosen family that showed up for each other. And for the first time in 2 years, I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning in responsibility and loneliness. And that's when my phone buzzed. That's when the text from Clara came. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, halfway between our places, neutral territory. I showed up 15 minutes early. I needed time to settle my nerves, to remember exactly why I was doing this. Not to reconcile, but to set boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. She walked in looking different. Still put together, but there was something tired around her eyes, something expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. She smiled at me like we were old friends meeting for a catch-up, not two people whose marriage had imploded because she'd wanted champagne problems instead of real life. She started talking before I'd even finished my coffee. This rehearsed speech about how she'd grown so much over the past 2 years, how she'd learned that money and excitement weren't everything, how she'd realized family was what mattered. I let her finish. I wanted to hear exactly how she'd justify abandoning our kids for Instagram validation and late-night bottle service. When she finally paused for breath, she said, "I want us to try again. I want to come back." I looked at her across that table and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, not even satisfaction. Just this calm certainty that she was no longer my problem to solve. I kept my voice even. I told her that ship had sailed the moment she'd chosen her new life over our family. I told her she was still Leo and Maya's mother, and I'd never interfere with that relationship, but she and I were done. Permanently. Completely. She blinked like she'd been slapped, like it had never occurred to her that I might have moved on. Then her expression shifted from shock to something uglier, something entitled and accusatory. She asked if there was someone else. I told her the truth. I said, yes, I was seeing someone. Someone who'd been there through fevers and homework meltdowns and all the regular moments she'd decided weren't worth her time. Clara's face went red with an anger that had no right to exist, given she'd been the one who left. She said, "So, you replaced me." I had to fight not to laugh at the audacity. I had to remind myself that getting angry would only drag this out. So instead, I explained as simply as possible that Chloe hadn't replaced anyone. She'd just filled the empty space Clara had left behind. Shown up when showing up mattered. And that wasn't replacement. It was just reality. The conversation should have ended there, but Clara wasn't done. She started talking about the kids, how they needed their real family back together, how confusing it must be for them to have some stranger playing house. And that's when my composure cracked, just slightly. She was trying to use Leo and Maya as weapons after barely seeing them consistently for 2 years. I told her the kids were fine. Better than fine, actually. They had stability and routine and people who showed up for them every single day. And if she wanted to be more involved in their lives, I'd support that. But it would be on a schedule that worked for everyone, not just her convenience. She didn't like that answer. She started talking about her rights as their mother, how she could get a lawyer and fight for more custody. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the document I'd been keeping, every missed pickup, every cancelled weekend, every time I'd had to rearrange my entire life because she'd flaked. I watched her face go pale as she realized I'd been documenting everything. Over the next few months, Clara did exactly what I'd feared. She started trying to buy her way back into the kids' affections with expensive gifts and big promises. Told Leo she'd get him the new gaming system. Told Maya they'd go to Disneyland next summer, even though I knew she couldn't afford it. The kids came back from her weekends loaded down with toys and sugar, completely off their routine. Staying up late because she didn't enforce bedtime, skipping homework because she wanted to take them to the mall. I'd spend the first half of every week getting them back on track. Leo's teacher emailed me, concerned because he'd stopped turning in assignments. He admitted Mommy said homework could wait because they were having special time together. I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying what I really thought about Clara's parenting priorities. The breaking point came on a random afternoon, about 4 months after her return. Chloe was at our duplex, helping Maya practice her spelling words while I made dinner. Leo was in the living room, absorbed in building something with his blocks. Clara showed up unannounced, knocking on the door. It wasn't her day, but she wanted to take the kids to some event downtown. When I opened the door, she saw Chloe sitting at the kitchen table with Maya. She froze. I could see the rage building behind her eyes. Then Maya, sweet, innocent Maya, who didn't understand the complicated adult politics happening around her, looked up at Chloe and said, "Thanks, Mommy." Because she'd gotten stuck on a word, and Chloe had helped her. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees instantly. Clara exploded in a way I'd never seen before, yelling about how dare I let some woman confuse their children, how dare I allow this disrespect of their real mother. Chloe quietly excused herself and left while I ushered the kids to their room so they wouldn't hear the rest. Once they were gone, I turned to Clara and finally said what needed to be said. I told her she couldn't show up sporadically and expect the kids to treat her like she'd never left. I told her that Chloe had earned their affection by being present for the boring, difficult parts of parenting that Clara had decided weren't worth her time. I said, you don't get to come back into their lives with presents and promises and expect that to erase 2 years of absence. They need you in the regular moments, too. The homework and the bedtime and the weekday dinners, not just the fun weekend events. She looked at me like I'd stabbed her, like I was being cruel instead of honest. After that confrontation, Clara did something that honestly shocked me, even though it probably shouldn't have. She told the kids they weren't allowed to mention Chloe when they were with her. Said it hurt her feelings to hear about Daddy's friend. Suddenly, Leo and Maya were walking on eggshells, trying to edit their own lives to avoid upsetting their mother. They stopped talking about our weekday routines or the fun things we did as a family unit. Started treating their time with Clara like a separate reality that couldn't touch their real life. I watched them grow more distant from her, even as she tried harder to win them over with material things. She still tells people her version of the story, the one where I turned the kids against her, or where Chloe stole her family. Never the version where she chose to leave, and then couldn't handle the consequences of that choice. Years later now, with the kids in middle school, they live primarily with me and Chloe. They see their mother every other weekend, when she remembers to confirm plans. They're good kids, well-adjusted, considering everything they've been through. But they're not close with Clara the way she wishes they were. She still posts on social media about being a devoted mother, still talks about the injustice of her situation to anyone who will listen. Still fundamentally believes that something was taken from her, rather than understanding she gave it away. The scariest part isn't that she left. People leave marriages every day, and sometimes it's the right choice. The scary part is that she still doesn't understand why she couldn't just come back and have everything be the same. Still doesn't grasp that love and family aren't things you can put on hold while you explore other options. And I think she's going to spend the rest of her life bitter about a loss that was entirely self-inflicted, blaming everyone except the person who actually made the choice to walk away. What do you think about Clara's expectations, and how I handled her return?